These are the most disturbing crimes that were committed on Facebook, and as the video goes on, they only get darker. People say all kinds of things on Facebook, most often through Facebook Live, and while that's usually harmless, the streams can sometimes take a turn, as some traders often engage in selling counterfeit objects. And although many of them escape consequences, this mother-son duo wasn't so lucky. It began on April 25th, 2022, when a woman from Mirandela, Portugal, who we'll call Maria, started a Facebook Live in her home. Surrounded by shelves filled with various fashion accessories, Maria showcased each of the products she had on sale to the potential customer watching her live, and everything was going well, until she brought out a pair of Adidas sneakers. But all of a sudden, her sale was interrupted by a loud bang, and it didn't take long to see where the sound came from. The son, who was also in the room, was arrested and taken into custody. But unfortunately and mysteriously, this was when the case completely went silent. Even after the video of the live streamed arrest went viral, Portuguese news outlets offered no information concerning what happened next. However, many believe that the duo probably got raided for selling counterfeit products. But something far weirder and more dangerous happened in the next case.
This is a dangerous and scary situation the entire state has been watching for 12 hours. A man holed up in his home near the Austin area shot 3 police officers.
On August 17, 2020, a 26-year-old man named Joseph Deshaun Taylor found himself in the middle of a terrifying situation in Cedar Park, Texas. His mother, Pasha Taylor, had called 911, claiming that Joseph had suddenly started behaving aggressively, attempted to steal her car, and was now trying to force his way into the room where she and her children were hiding, while holding a gun. As a result, 3 officers were immediately dispatched to the home to check on the family, and at first they tried to get inside by knocking on the door, but upon receiving no response, they broke it down and made their way to the upstairs bedroom, where Joseph was holding his mother and siblings hostage. When the officers reached the room, Joseph opened fire on them, and in response, the officers fired back, exchanging over 50 shots with Joseph before he then proceeded to barricade himself in the room with his mother and siblings, leaving the officers with non-fatal injuries. And seeing that they couldn't handle the situation alone, the officers ran down to call for help. Now, as more officers arrived on the scene, the area was quickly cordoned off with yellow tape, but because of the initial experience of the first officers that arrived on the scene, they realized that trying to get entry by force would be dangerous for the hostages. So instead, the police team decided they would attempt to convince Joseph to surrender. Now, at this point, this might have seemed like an impossible goal, but as soon as Joseph barricaded himself in, he actually started a Facebook Live, giving the officers an opportunity to contact him for a negotiation. And in the Facebook Live, Joseph was seen sitting in some corner of the room smoking a joint. And although the entire live stream would go on for a total of 1 hour, only 3 minutes are currently accessible. And in this short clip, the police negotiator tries to assess the situation in the house and also engages Joseph in an active conversation. The negotiator also asks Joseph if he would allow his little brother to come out of the house, to which Joseph replies that he would prefer he stayed in the house with his mother. And the clip would then end with Joseph telling the negotiator that he would not take any steps until he finished his conversation with his family. And this would not be the only time Joseph opened Facebook. At 4:30 a.m. the next day, he posted a selfie with a cloth around his bloodied hand, with the caption, "Not fun being a target." Then around 7 a.m., approximately 16 hours after everything happened, Joseph decided that he'd had enough, immediately releasing his siblings to the cops. And not long after that, he walked out with his mother and then surrendered. He was then placed under arrest before being taken to a hospital to check for any potential injuries from the earlier gunfire. On the same day, Joseph was also charged with 3 counts of aggravated injury with a deadly weapon on a public servant and 3 counts of aggravated kidnapping. Now, in his trial, Joseph's defense team actually tried to argue that he was mentally unstable and that everything he did was an act of insanity. But despite that, on December 3rd, 2025, Judge Rick Cannon rejected the insanity claim and found Joseph guilty of all the charges he was arrested for. He's still awaiting sentencing though and remains in custody. But as horrifying as Joseph's story is, this next one is even more devastating since it involves a joyride gone wrong. On July 6, 2017, 21-year-old Nikola Barbasova was driving a car near the Ústí nad Labem region of the Czech Republic. Seated beside Nikola was her friend Nikola Vorlova, who we'll refer to with her last name to avoid any confusion. Now, somewhere along the line, Vorlova decided to turn on her phone and started a Facebook Live, which would later turn out to be a tragic mistake. The first 10 minutes of the live stream started with both Nikola and Vorlova being cheerful and dancing to the song playing on the radio while talking to the viewers. But as the live progressed, their actions became more and more concerning. While Vorlova was the one holding the phone, she kept urging Nikola to look away from the road to show her the live chat. On top of that, Nikola even admitted that she was driving recklessly and that they were at the risk of being pulled over by traffic cops. But instead of slowing down, they both just laughed at the prospect of getting arrested and kept blazing down the road. And at the end of the first 10 minutes of the stream, Nikola revealed the speed she was traveling at. But then she started gradually increasing the speed of the vehicle even more. And at this point, the ride became so scary that even Vorlova let out a nervous laugh. But a few moments later, the situation would take a very disturbing turn. Within a split second, the car, which was a Volkswagen Beetle, slammed into a bus stop, and what followed was an eerie stretch of silence, before concerned pedestrians ran to the car and attempted to help the girls. And while the life was still going on, the people in the background could be heard calling emergency services for help. And a few minutes later, as the police and paramedics arrived, some more people came near the car, and that was when they heard one of the two girls screaming in pain. This turned out to be Rolova, who luckily survived with minor bruises, but the same couldn't be said of Nicola, who unfortunately passed away in a span of seconds upon impact. At the half-hour mark, a policeman spotted the phone, but didn't notice that any live stream was actually taking place, so it just kept rolling. And not long after the first responders arrived, a concerned man could be seen approaching the ambulance. It was Nicola's dad, who was desperate to know about his daughter's condition, and their life would then continue until an unidentified man switched it off 20 minutes later. Now, within a couple of hours, this live recording went completely viral on the Czech internet, and even years later, the video is still used as a cautionary tale for new drivers on the dangers of reckless driving. But unlike this case, this next one didn't happen due to negligence, but because of pure malice.
And this afternoon, hate crime charges leveled against 4 young African Americans after police say they targeted a young disabled white man. Authorities saying tonight he was targeted because of his disability and his race.
In early January of 2017, when most people were returning to their regular lives after the New Year's celebrations, a disturbing live stream began circulating on Facebook that shocked the entire country. In this video, a young man could be seen bound, gagged, and brutally injured, while some voices could be heard laughing in the background. But as unsettling as this video was, the story behind it is even worse. It actually began on December 31st, 2016, when an 18-year-old white male, whom we will be calling Adam, was dropped off by his parents at a McDonald's in Streamwood, Illinois. Adam was a mentally challenged kid, which naturally made it difficult for him to have friends. But one day, Adam was actually contacted by a schoolmate named Jordan Hill, and upon being contacted by Jordan, Adam was obviously happy, and they both decided that Adam would be celebrating New Year's over at Jordan's place. Now, Adam's parents didn't have any objections to this, as they were glad that he could finally socialize with others, and it was with this idea in mind that they dropped him off in front of the McDonald's, where he was then picked up by Jordan. But beneath the friendly facade, Jordan was never the kind of person Adam believed him to be. From the very beginning, Jordan had reached out to Adam with one goal in mind: to use him and turn the entire situation into his own twisted form of entertainment. Even the van he used to pick up Adam wasn't his. It had been stolen from another location. Yet Adam, because of his innocence and disability, had no way of seeing any of this. To him, Jordan wasn't a threat, he was a friend. Over the course of the next 3 days, Jordan would practically take Adam hostage in the back of the van and drive to various locations to meet his friends all over the city, while Adam had no choice but to wait. But by January 3rd, Adam's parents had started getting worried about him, so they decided to file a missing person report. Then, in an attempt to reach her son, Adam's mother contacted Jordan on his Facebook, who in turn replied that she would have to pay $300 before he would actually free Adam. At this point, the situation had effectively turned into a kidnapping. Now, after that, Jordan actually decided to stop driving around and finally removed Adam from the van and locked him in a room instead, belonging to his friend Brittany and Tanisha, who were sisters. Now, at their apartment in the Homeland Square area, they were soon joined by Tesfaye Cooper, another friend of Jordan who'd come to participate in their evil plan. And what happened next would be seen by thousands. Once inside, Brittany turned on her phone and started a Facebook live stream while all the others tied Adam up and put a cloth gag in his mouth. And in the live stream, the group could be seen punching and kicking Adam and even cutting off part of his scalp, and also forcing him to drink from a toilet while shouting phrases like "white people" and "Trump," and even forcing him to repeat those phrases. Now, the total torture lasted for more than an hour, although only 28 minutes of the ordeal were actually recorded. Now, at one point, someone from the group called Adam's mother again and demanded $300 for his release, but she still wasn't willing to cooperate with them. And while all of this was going on, a neighbor, disturbed by the noise coming from the apartment, contacted the police to file a complaint. And after some time, officers finally arrived on the scene, but since they weren't actually aware of the hostage situation going on, they simply knocked on their door and asked them to keep the noise down. But once the officers left, the group went straight to the neighbor's house to threaten them for daring to call the police. But the thing was, the entire group left, which left Adam completely alone in the apartment, and he saw this as an opportunity to escape and quickly ran outside. And so at approximately 5:15 p.m, Michael Donnelly, one of the officers responding to the 911 call, spotted him wandering outside in the bitter cold. And Michael noticed that his clothes were torn and that his face was covered in cuts. So he decided to approach him and asked for his name, which he then typed into the database. And this is when he discovered that a missing persons report had been filed under that name. Now, to gain a full understanding of the situation, Michael began interviewing Adam about what happened to him, as Adam began explaining how he actually got kidnapped and tortured. And coincidentally, it was also around this same period that the live stream was uploaded and it started going viral. And since all the suspects actually showed their face in the video, it only took a couple of hours before they were all located and arrested on charges of aggravated kidnapping, aggravated unlawful restraint, aggravated battery, and hate crime offenses. And so on February 10th, 2017, the entire group was put on trial before a criminal court in Cook County, Illinois, where they all pleaded not guilty. and the bail was set for all four: $900,000 for Jordan, $800,000 for Cooper, $500,000 for Brittany, and $200,000 for Tanisha. Now, as the video continued to spread online, it sparked major outrage due to the racial undertone of the attack, with the hashtag BLM kidnapping trending massively, as certain groups attempted to tie the attack to the Black Lives Matter movement. But investigators would later find no evidence connecting the group to any movement. And in order to separate themselves from the gruesome act, members of the Chicago Black Lives Matter community even had to drop a statement, denying any association with the suspects. Now, following a lengthy trial, the four friends would begin receiving the consequences of their actions on December 8, 2017. Brittany pleaded guilty to hate crime, intimidation, and aggravated battery. However, her kidnapping charges were dropped, and she ended up receiving 4 years of probation along with 200 hours of community service. On April 19, 2018, Tanisha pleaded guilty to hate crime, intimidation, and aggravated battery. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Then on July 5, 2018, Jordan also pleaded guilty to aggravated kidnapping and hate crime charges. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his role in planning and executing the attack. And a week later, on July 12, Tesfaye also pleaded guilty to aggravated kidnapping and hate crime. He received a 7-year prison sentence. But as horrifying as this incident is, this next one was even worse, since it almost turned an entire country upside down.
She shows no significant sign of remorse, even continuing to profess the truth of her allegations.
I feel no sense of triumph, only sadness.
On May 19, 2020, a Facebook user named Eleanor Williams, whom we will be calling Ellie, posted a few pictures on a wall, showing her entire body and face completely covered in bruises, with a long caption detailing how she'd been violently brutalized by some men for a long time, and left in a park where she was found by the local police. Now, the post specifically mentioned that those who harmed her were a part of Asian gangs that have been operating in Barrow, the place where she lived. And because of the volatile political state of the UK at the time, this post would end up causing massive outrage in the community. In summer of 2020, for example, the hate crimes against people of color tripled, with the Cumbria police alone recording a total of 151 incidents. But instead of arresting the people who injured Ellie, the police decided to arrest her instead, making the entire situation so much worse.
Hi Ellie, are you alright?
Yeah,
If you just listen to my colleague, she's just gonna have to read some off a bit of paper. Alright.
When the news of this arrest came to light, it sparked a nationwide protest, with hundreds of people taking to the streets to demand justice for Ellie. An online fundraising campaign was also created in her name, which ended up raising over £20,000. And at this point, Ellie had the general public on her side, which makes sense. But all these protests would soon be brought into question when some disturbing facts about her past started to surface. It turns out that Ellie had been showing tendencies of hurting herself since she was very young. However, it was not significant enough for her to seek medical attention, and her life went on as normal. But that would change in November of 2017, when Ellie called the police for the first time to accuse a friend named Cameron of getting her drunk and taking advantage of her in his house. In an interview conducted at the police station, she went into a lot of detail about how the whole thing happened.
Cameron had sat on top of my lap. He was pulled my dress down because it was like off the shoulder dress. And he took my bra down and all laughing at me. So I thought I was going to die.
But what made the story even more disturbing was the fact that Ellie claimed that she originally didn't remember anything until Cameron texted her on Snapchat saying that he gave her HIV. And scared after seeing the message, she claimed to have gone to the hospital to get herself checked. But upon being interviewed by the police, Cameron gave a different account. He was horrified that he was being accused of doing something so grievous, and said that while Ellie was indeed at his party, he barely talked to her at all, and even had to call her sister to pick her up because she was so drunk. But even though he denied all of these allegations, Cameron would still end up spending a few days in jail before he was released due to lack of evidence. But still, the officers continued to investigate these allegations, and this would go on until January 2018, when Ellie actually decided to formally withdraw her complaint for reasons she didn't disclose. Now, over a year later, in May of 2019, Ellie crossed paths with the police again, when she called to file a complaint against a man who she claimed was troubling her. And in the following interview at the police station, Ellie identified the man who'd harmed her as Jordan Trengrove. She claimed to have met him in March of that year, and not long after they started talking, Jordan apparently suddenly attacked her and left her with serious injuries. And when Jordan was arrested by the police, he too was shocked by the accusations against him and denied hurting Ellie in any way, saying that they had actually only met once.
And I said, have you seen Ellie? And they said, yeah, she's gone home, she's being sick. And I thought, right, she's just had a bit too many to drink, she's gone home. And at the end of that night, there was a bit of a disturbance in a taxi rank between me and another guy, just verbal arguing. So the police arrived and took us both home on that night. 2 weeks later, I'm at my mum's house, and I got woke up and it was the police, and they were arresting me for an ABH and and they said it was to do with Ellie.
And to further prove his innocence, Jordan revealed that on the night of the alleged incident, he had in fact been taken home by police themselves after they spotted him arguing with a taxi driver. And this strong alibi allowed the police to let Jordan go. But it wouldn't take long for him to get in trouble with the cops again. Now, a while later, Ellie called the police to inform them that Jordan was at her flat and was trying to hit her. And because the police didn't want to take any chances, they decided to arrest Jordan again at his residence, charged him with 3 counts of violation, and put him in jail. This event also affected Jordan's family as people started to shun them and vandalize their property by spraying obscene words on it. And while this was happening, Ellie was becoming more and more unpredictable. She began drinking a lot, and every time she drank, she would disappear for some time, only for the police to then find her at odd places with bruises and cuts. Now, they initially believed that she was trying to hurt herself because of all the trauma she'd been through at the hands of several men, and that with Jordan in jail, her condition would eventually improve. But then 1 month later, Ellie would come back to the police station to make another complaint.
So, what we come to talk about today? I was young, stupid, just got house parties and stuff, and then at the house parties, older men got introduced to
The Rami mentioned in the interview was Mohammed Ramzan, a well-known local business owner who was married and had 4 children. In Ellie's complaint, she claimed that Mohammed was taking advantage of her since a very young age, also accusing him of being the head of a major organization that was involved in the sales of younger people to paying customers. And she also claimed that Mohammed once took her to Amsterdam to sell her for 25,000 euros and would even write down a list of other young people who also suffered under Mohammed. And with England's past history of dealing with such gangs, Ellie's claims actually seemed somewhat plausible to the officers. And so on July 7th, 2019, Mohammed was also arrested by the police. But during the investigation that followed, Mohammed actually revealed that he barely knew Ellie and only recalled her meeting once at a house party. He also denied all the allegations, and since the police had no real evidence against him, they let him go after 48 hours, while the investigation would still go on. However, the actual damage was already done, since news of Mohammed's arrest had gone viral. And just like Jordan, Mohammed would end up facing so much backlash that his business would lose 80% of his customers, and people would also spit on him while he was walking on the street, calling him a young person lover. And this stress would eventually become so severe that Mohammed attempted to check himself out of this earth. Now, over the course of the next few months, Ellie kept going to the police, giving them details about the attack. She revealed that Mohammed had transported her to 3 different locations for the purpose of selling her to a willing buyer. One location, Blackpool, was in England, while the other 2, Ibiza and Amsterdam, were outside of the country. And since Blackpool was the nearest location on Ellie's list, the police asked her if she would be willing to come with them to Blackpool and identify all the locations that she'd been in that town. And she agreed to go, but when they actually reached Blackpool, Ellie decided to take a U-turn on her words and only replied with "I'm not sure" to every question she was asked.
Was it on that route that you took us on, or was it somewhere else? Not sure.
The police would then drive around Blackpool for 2 days, but they still couldn't get any information concerning whether the crimes took place or not. But then, on the 3rd day, they stumbled across a crucial piece of evidence. A receptionist at the Savoy Hotel in the neighborhood confirmed that Ellie had indeed checked in at the hotel some time ago. But contrary to her claims that she was with Mohammed, CCTV cameras showed that she was all alone, and a nearby store's CCTV even recorded her buying cup noodles all by herself. And once she went into her actual room, no one exited or entered for 24 hours, except for Ellie. Now, back in Barrow, the officials started interviewing other victims that Ellie actually named, and shockingly, all of them had no clue what the officers were actually talking about, with most of them claiming that they only knew Ellie in passing. And this, combined with the CCTV footage, convinced the investigators that Ellie had been lying about what happened to her all along, sending the police team on a wild goose chase. And as a result, a warrant was issued for her arrest. But before they could actually get to her, Ellie went missing again and was only found a couple of hours later when her friends spotted her alone on a bridge. Now, after the police got this information, they went straight to her house. But when Ellie actually opened the door, she was covered in bruises again.
You alright? Sit down. Sit down for me. Sit down.
And the officers, concerned, asked her how she got the bruises. And this was when she brought up another story about how a man named Oliver had drugged her and exploited her at a train station in Preston. Now, to verify this once again, the police checked the camera footage. Now, in the footage, they did find Ellie walking out of the train station just an hour before. And after some time, she bumped into someone who was clearly Oliver. They had a brief chat and then left for some time. But after reappearing again, Ellie walked back normally and no bruises were actually visible on her face. And even Ellie's friends who spotted her on the bridge recalled that she was all alone and that there were actually no injuries on her face. And so from this point forward, Ellie just kind of started pulling out stories out of thin air when she was interrogated over the course of a couple of days. At one point, she claimed that a man named Lee had attacked her and gotten her pregnant, and that she gave birth to a baby named Bailey. And on top of this, she also claimed that she had an abortion using knitting needles. But the problem was that none of these incidences were ever mentioned in her medical records. And when confronted by the police about all of these disparities in her claims, Ellie simply claimed that she couldn't tell the truth because the men from the grooming gangs were forcing her to mislead the police.
And they've told me to tell you certain things would put you off the scent of tracing them.
difficulty is, Ellie, that you told us lies.
I know.
If you tell us lies,
it's hard to believe the truth because lies have
Absolutely.
been said. I get it. I do get it. But I don't get these bruises for no reason, you know.
Now the police actually decided to give her one last chance and checked her flight records, and as expected, there were no traces of her ever flying to Ibiza or Amsterdam. And so with all of this evidence, the police finally arrested her in May of 2020. But they wouldn't be able to keep her locked up for long, as she would end up getting out on bail. And while free, yet again, Ellie disappeared, violating all of her bail conditions. And it was while she was still missing on May 19th, 2020 that she would make the infamous Facebook post that triggered the biggest chaos ever. And a few hours later, the police found her in a park again, covered in serious bruises. But in the same park, the police found a hammer, which they then tagged as evidence of whatever was done to her. And while the police were not trying to figure out what happened out of Ellie, her Facebook post was building a narrative that was the farthest from the truth. In her flat, the police actually found multiple mobile phones, each containing different Snapchat accounts. And in one of these accounts, officers found a conversation that she had with her school friend Harry Cooper. Now somewhere along the lines, the dialogue got a bit inappropriate. But this was when Ellie decided to change Harry's name to Rami, which was one of the text screenshots that she had shown as proof of Mohammed's harassment. As for the rest of the accounts, they were just fake profiles made of people she claimed they were part of the Asian group gang. And so with the police now getting control over these accounts, Ellie's allegations started to fall apart. On top of that, the hammer that was found in the park was sent to the lab for DNA testing, and the results showed that only one person actually used it, which was Ellie, of course. And this was further proven by CCTV camera footage, which showed her purchasing the hammer. And so this finally aided the police in putting Ellie in jail for a non-bailable offense. And so in October of 2022, Ellie was put on trial, with the whole legal battle spanning over 10 weeks, with multiple people testifying against Ellie. And even though the trial was long, it would only take the jury 3.5 hours to produce a verdict, sentencing Ellie to 8.5 years in prison.
On count 1, there will be a sentence of 6 months imprisonment. On counts 3 to 5, the sentence will be 3 years imprisonment, concurrent on each count, but consecutive to the sentence on count 1, giving a total so far of 3.5 years. There will be sentences of 5 years on counts 5, 6 and 7, concurrent with one another, but consecutive to the sentences already imposed. Finally, there will be a sentence of 1 year and 3 months imprisonment on count 8 and 6 months imprisonment on count 9. Those sentences to run concurrently with each other and the other sentences imposed. That gives a total sentence of 8.5 years imprisonment. You will serve half of the total sentence of imprisonment in custody, after which you will be released on license.
However, while this sentence was appropriate punishment for the false allegations, it couldn't repair any of the damage that was already done.
You were able to say anything to Ellie Williams today, what would you say?
Why? I want to know why you have done this to us. Why? Because she's not only done it to me and Mo, she's done it to our families, and there's innocent children and kids involved in our families along with that, and she's destroyed their lives as long with ours.
And while we saw how Facebook was used by Ellie to propagate a false story, in the next case, Facebook Marketplace was used in a similar way to lure unquestioning victims.
A 19-year-old woman is facing capital murder charges after police say that she shot and killed a man who was selling a phone on Facebook Marketplace.
In November of 2024, Ahmad Akbulov, a 66-year-old resident of Saxe, Texas, put up an advertisement on Facebook Marketplace to sell his old iPhone 15. And after a while, he got a message from someone named Anika Alman, who was willing to buy, and they both agreed to meet on November 8th, 2024, near a gas station. But on that day, it wasn't Anika who showed up, but another woman, 19-year-old Amaya Medrano. And little did Ahmad know that Amaya was actually on probation for stabbing someone in 2023, and that this simple encounter was about to alter the course of his life. Ahmad kept the conversation short and handed the phone to Amaya, and this is when things took a turn for the worse. Once she actually had the phone, Amaya ran from the scene without paying Ahmad at all, and Ahmad, after realizing what happened, started chasing Amaya. But this would prove to be a very bad decision, because after running for some distance, Amaya would abruptly turn around and bring out a gun from her pocket, with which she would then shoot Ahmad. And even though nearby police would hear the shots and come running to the scene of the crime, it was already too late, as Ahmad succumbed to his injuries, giving Amaya enough time to successfully get away with the phone. Now, 2 Dallas police officers who were passing nearby rushed to the scene and found Ahmad's body. But with Amaya successfully escaping from the scene, the police had nothing but the gas station camera recordings to aid their investigations. And even though these were never released to the public, the police claimed to have seen the clips multiple times in an effort to note the tattoos on Amaya's body as a means of identifying her. And they then started going through multiple Facebook accounts in the area. And after searching for a while, they finally landed on the account with the name Amaya Medrano. And Amaya would end up playing into their hands, because just a few days later after the crime, she would post a listing on Facebook attempting to sell a black iPhone 15, the exact exact model that Ahmad was carrying. And from then on, the police discovered that Amaya was working closely with Anika, and even though it was Amaya who pulled the trigger, Anika was still responsible for responding to the listing and luring Ahmad into a trap. And so on November 15th, both Amaya and Anika were taken into custody by a task force. And at this point, the stakes were clear. Under Texas law, the crime they were accused of carried the possibility of a life sentence. And for a good amount of time, that was the reality they were facing. But eventually, both entered plea deals, and the sentences got reduced. Amaya was sentenced to 55 years in prison, and Anika received a sentence of 37 years. But this is not the first time such a thing happened in Dallas. A year before Ahmad's murder, something similar happened in Arlington.
Why they did this? For what? For a cut?
On March 21st, 2023, 51-year-old Kuter Hamdan met up with two guys who contacted him to buy his purple Dodge Charger after his son posted an ad on Facebook Marketplace. Initially, his son was supposed to show up for the meeting, but since he couldn't make it, Kuter went in his place. The two guys were 18-year-old Christian Socedo and 19-year-old Luis Gutierrez. From the get-go, they both showed interest in buying the car, so Kuter allowed them to go on a test drive. And at the end of this drive, some bystanders saw Kuter get out of the car and talk to Christian and Luis. But very suddenly, the situation got heated, with nobody around knowing what was going on. And it was at this moment that Luis decided to pull out a gun and shoot Kuter in the chest. The car then sped off and disappeared, while the people around were trying to call 911. Now, by the time first responders arrived, one of the bystanders had tried to save Kuter's life by giving him CPR, but he unfortunately already died. Now, immediately the authorities started searching for the actual shooters, and thankfully it didn't take long for them to strike a major breakthrough, as the Charger had actually been abandoned near a shopping center. And when they looked at the CCTV recording in the premises, they found two men exiting the vehicle and walking away. Now, another critical fact that helped them identify the suspects was the IP addresses of Luis's Facebook account, which showed that he was indeed present at the location of the crime at the time it happened. And the police also matched the CCTV pictures of the two to their Facebook pictures and found out their actual names and locations. And so on April 5th, 2023, the police conducted a traffic stop where they stopped a black Dodge Charger containing Luis and his brother Armando. Luis was then taken into custody and charged with capital violence and held on a $1 million bond. To catch Christian, the police tracked down the names of the people close to him and began interviewing them one by one. And at first, his friends of course weren't cooperative, but eventually one woman decided to reveal Christian's location, leading to his arrest too. He was also charged with capital violence and held on a $500,000 bond. However, as of January 2026, there's still no information regarding their sentencing. But as brutal as Kutar's death was, it pales in comparison to the calculated and evil nature of this next crime.
Johnson County 911.
Honey, I need a name was bad.
Okay, do you want to attempt to do CPR?
In tiny mountain city, Tennessee, almost everyone knows everybody. The place is quiet, rural, and kind of frozen in time. But on January 31st, 2012, the town woke up to a crime that felt completely unreal. It all began with a 30-year-old woman named Janelle Leigh Potter, who was living with her parents, Marvin and Barbara Potter. The Potter family lived on a hill and mostly kept to themselves. Marvin was a Vietnam veteran and former Marine, and Barbara, the mother, was a housewife. Now, as the story goes, Janelle's childhood was very difficult because she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at a very young age, and in an attempt to make the life easier for their daughter, Janelle's parents started taking extra, sometimes unusual care of her, in addition to subjecting her to rules that were quite restrictive. She wasn't allowed to stay up late nor go out at night. She was even denied the privilege of learning how to drive a car, since this would enable her to leave the home anytime she wanted and meet new people. And these restrictions would continue even when Janelle was well into her 30s. On the contrary though, her sister, Christy, had moved out of the house long ago to escape the strict behavior of their parents. And this made Janelle the lone child in the house, and as a result, all eyes were only on her. Now, since she wasn't allowed to interact with strangers, Janelle leaned heavily towards social media, especially Facebook. And while she barely posted anything on her profile, she continuously used her Facebook account to monitor what other people in the area were up to. But her social life would soon undergo some drastic changes. In 2009, Janelle had to make a trip to the pharmacy to get some medicine for herself. Now, this was usually Barbara's task, but since she wasn't home that day, Janelle made the trip alone. And this was when she first started befriending the clerk named Tracy Greenwell. And despite her restrictions, slowly their friendship bloomed, and Janelle started to talk to Tracy more and more. And she even introduced Tracy to her parents. And only when they approved of her did Janelle start visiting Tracy's place. And this opened a whole new world to Janelle, as Tracy would introduce Janelle to her friends, and they would in turn become friends with her. But the most important meeting in this whole story was that of Janelle and Tracy's brother, Billy Payne. Now, Billy and his wife, Billie Jean Hayworth, stayed with Tracy with their 7-month-old Tyler. And everyone really liked the couple Billy and Billy, and they would frequently show up to meet the two and sometimes even babysit Tyler, with the couple and their kid forming an important part of their friend circle. But over time, time, Janelle would actually start to develop a crush on Billy, and obviously this was impractical since Billy was already married. Now, even though she barely talked to him, everyone in the friend circle could actually tell that Janelle was kind of into him because of her behavior when he was around. And as the situation started getting awkward, Tracy decided to hook up Janelle with her cousin instead, Jamie Kurt. And surprisingly, Janelle and Jamie hit it off instantly, and Janelle started spending more time with Jamie than the rest of her friends. And she would simply lie to her parents and say that she was going to Tracy's home and go to Jamie's place instead. Now, a few months would pass, and Janelle would eventually introduce Jamie to her parents.
What's Jamie to you?
He's just a friend. We've been friends for years. He's friend of our family. Yeah,
He's a friend to all of us, to me.
And assured him that he was only a friend. And Janelle's parents actually trusted the statement without question and kept calling Jamie home to help them with computers. And over time, even Jamie would become a trusted member of the Potter family. Now, at this point, Janelle's life was going great, but what she didn't know was that the peace and quiet was about to be disturbed. It began on a fateful day when she noticed a few harsh messages on her Facebook. Now, we don't know the exact details of it, but these messages were apparently so bad that Janelle got scared and complained about them to Barbara. And when Barbara sat down with Janelle and asked her who she thinks might be behind the harsh comments, she said that it might be Billie Jean, because while Janelle didn't disclose her crush for Billy to her mother, she claimed that Billie Jean, so his wife, was jealous of her and that she was always rude to her when they spoke because she was scared that Billy might leave her for Janelle. Now, Barbara decided to take matters into her own hands and started talking to Tracy to figure out what was happening. Now, naturally, the allegations spread and landed on the ears of Billy and Billie Jean, who were both shocked that they were being accused of such things. Now, Billy denied ever having any interest in Janelle, and Billie Jean denied ever commenting anything on her Facebook, and so the matter remained unresolved. But because of the whole drama, the group started becoming fragmented. But while everyone else decided to pick a side, Tracy actually remained neutral, claiming that all she wanted was that everyone should be at peace again. Yet the group was never the same, with Janelle constantly bringing up their matter and arguing with Billie Jean. Now, there was another crucial event when James claimed that her house was attacked by stones, with the stones having the names Bill Payne and Billie Jean written over them in black ink, which prompted Barbara to call the police. And so as this whole drama and the tension continued to rise, some members of the friend group decided to step back completely, unfriending each other on Facebook and cutting off contact in hope that the time apart would calm the situation down. Both Billy and Billie Jean unfriended Janelle. Now, around this time, after unfriending Janelle, friends began to notice that Billy and Billie Jean had not been seen or heard from for a while, and so concerned, a few of them decided to check on the couple. Now, when they knocked on the couple's front door, no one answered. Now, even this was not unusual, and they were completely used to entering the house through the back door, which is what they did this time around. And once inside, they noticed that it was unusually quiet, and they would soon find the reason for this when they went upstairs to face a bloody scene. Billy and Billie Jean were on the floor, covered in blood with multiple gunshot wounds on their bodies. In Billie Jean's arms was her son, who was covered in blood but crying and unharmed. For a small town like Mountain City, this kind of incident was unprecedented. National media landed in the city.
These murders have literally torn apart the sleepy little town of Mountain City, Tennessee.
And investigators began searching for the criminal. Yet for a crime of such severity and malice, there was barely any clue for the police to base their investigation on. So they decided to start by making a comprehensive list of suspects. And not surprisingly, the first name on the list was Janelle. Detectives then brought Janelle in for questioning and pressed her about her involvement in the crime. She, however, denied any wrongdoing and repeatedly defended herself. The investigators then interviewed her parents, Barbara and Marvin, but each time they also insisted that they knew nothing about their daughter's role and stood firmly by her side.
Actually, I feel bad about the situation because I didn't put no harm on them. They've been harassing me in my driveway, on our property, and then yesterday morning when I got on Facebook is when I found out. And, I'm sorry it happened, but, that's all I can tell you is they have been harassing the living.
Now, they then turned their attention to Jamie, Tracy's cousin. This time, however, they would plug him into a polygraph or a lie detection test. And under the pressure of that, Jamie eventually cracked and revealed something that left the detectives puzzled.
Is the CIA here? CIA? Ask the question. Why did you ask about the CIA? Because he says he works for them.
He admitted that he and Marvin, Janelle's father, were responsible for killing Billy and his wife.
Who shot him?
He claimed that they acted under instructions from a CIA agent named Chris, who told him that their job was to protect Janelle and promised that they would never face consequences. And with this very weird confession, the police arrested Marvin as well as Jamie.
All this crap started. I've had my wife threatened. My wife has been threatened. They've threatened to take Janelle, cut her head off. And you hear people plotting to catch your daughter in a restroom and murder her I gotta run now. It's just Janelle Barker what you did.
But there was still the question of who the supposed CIA agent named Chris was. And when the detectives searched Marvin's truck, they found bags of shredded paper. And the investigators began reviewing the documents more closely. And what they found were copies of email exchanges between Chris and the Potter family. In those emails, Chris wrote that he had been observing the cyberbullying that was directed against Janelle. And since he was CIA, it was his job to protect her. And as the correspondence continued, Chris gradually earned Marvin and Barbara's trust. And his messages played directly into their fear for their daughter's safety. And so one day, Chris claimed that he possessed CCTV footage showing Billy and Billie Jean planning to kill Janelle. These allegations deeply shook Barbara, and by this point she'd grown so close to Chris that she began describing him as being like a son to her. One of the messages he sent to them reads, "She's a good person. These girls are just driving her so crazy, and you know they're crazy. But what they're doing is still wrong, and hurting her like they are. There's no reason for it, just because she's sweet and very pretty, prettier than them. With you and Buddy, I hope you all can get them, and that you know what you're all doing is great. You're going to help the town. I wish I could kill them, but right now I really can't." And since the police apparently did nothing about their daughter's safety, Barbara and Marvin took matters into their own hands. And since Chris reassured them that he would erase any legal consequences, it made them so confident that they decided to break into Billy's home. There, Marvin shot them both, ending their lives in the most brutal way possible. And with this confession, it seemed like the investigation was finally over. But still, the officers were left with a far more troubling question. Who exactly was Chris? Who was the CIA agent who convinced his family to actually murder somebody? And when investigators tracked the IP addresses tied to the emails, they were led back to the Potter family computer. A forensic linguist was then brought in, at which point they discovered striking similarities between the language in the emails and Janelle's own writing style. As it turns out, Chris never actually existed. Instead, the entire persona had been created by Janelle herself. And with this new revelation, the police then proceeded to arrest Janelle as well, and prosecute her alongside the rest of the suspects. And after a long trial, Jamie, who was present at the time of the shooting, took a plea deal that guaranteed only 25 years in prison if he testified against the Potter family. Janelle, Barbara, and Marvin were sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison in 2015. But to this day, Janelle claims that she had no role to play in the crime, and it was all orchestrated by her father to protect her. But as horrific as this story was, this next one is even more sinister, since it involved internet friends gone wrong.
Police have formally identified the dead girl as 10-year-old Ashley Hall. They say they believe she may have met her attacker on the internet. The man who led them to her body is still in custody.
On January 6, 2009, the police arrived at the front door of a man named Peter Chapman to question him over a simple traffic violation. They knocked on the door over and over again, but got no response. Now this was problematic, since Peter was a registered offender, which meant that he had to sign in to a police station every month. But over the course of that month, they would keep visiting his house with the hopes of finding him there, yet there was never a trace of any Peter there. And so in order to locate him, the police issued an England-wide alert. And 24 hours later, while everyone was searching for Peter, an officer pulled over a car near Sedgefield, England, and took the owner into custody for insurance violations. And this man turned out to be Peter, but the police didn't notice it at first, so they were only concerned with the traffic violation. Yet before they found out that the man they arrested had a nationwide alert on him, Peter voluntarily confessed to a whole different crime he'd committed. And this confession would stun the police, and in the coming days, he would enrage the whole country. But before we talk about what Peter did, it is important to explore Peter's history with the law. Now, Peter had showcased violent tendencies all his life. In 1992, he was just 15 when he first came to the attention of police for physically injuring a minor. Then 4 years later, at 19, he went on to commit further crimes against 2 adult workers. And this particular incident involved him using a knife. So he would end up facing serious charges, resulting in a 7-year prison sentence. But after serving half of a sentence, he was released due to his good behavior. However, prison time had little to no effect on Peter, as he would continue threatening women in his neighborhood, leading to even more arrests and jail terms. But in 2008, he decided to stay low for some time and shifted his activity to the online space, using a Facebook account registered under the name Peter Cartwright. Even though the account was fake, it quickly became popular, owing to the fact that he used pictures of bare-chested muscular boys in his profile, which made him very attractive to women. Now, hiding behind this false identity, Peter would go on to contact around 3,000 women, ranging from people not of age to married women. But out of all of the women he contacted, it was Ashley Hall, a young person from Warwick Square, who would suffer the greatest. Before meeting Peter, Ashley was just like any other young person trying to navigate life. After completing school, Ashley decided that she wanted to be a nurse and moved out of her mother's house. And she stayed in touch with her family through Facebook Messenger. And it was there that she came across Peter's fake account, Peter Cartwright. Now, Ashley immediately took a liking to Peter, who was exceptionally kind with her and showered her with praise face every chance he got. And looking at the photos Peter posted, Ashley had no reason to believe that the account was being run by anyone other than a person her age. So she decided that they would meet in person. But on the day of the meeting, no one showed up, and so Ashley was disappointed. But when she contacted Peter, he apologized and asked if they could reschedule another meeting on October 25th, 2009. And in the chats leading up to the meeting, Peter told Ashley that his father would pick her up, and would even go on to impersonate an older man in their conversations.
Hi hun, it's Pete's dad. Are you sure you don't mind me picking you up? Pete is really looking forward to seeing you. And yes, it's okay for you to stay.
And from there, Peter switched tactics and began posing as a teenager again.
My dad's on his way, babe. He says excuse state of him. Lol. He doesn't have to come in and meet your mom, does he? LOL. He'll be a mess probably. LOL. Oh, and are you wearing some underwear for me? Hehe.
To which Ashley replied,
okay, babe. And no, he doesn't. LOL. And it's okay. Haha. What car has he got? And you will have to wait and see, won't you?
Ashley then told her mother, Andrea Hall, that she would be staying with her friends from college. And her mother agreed, but only under the condition that Ashley promised to be home by 10:30 the next morning. However, the following day there was no communication from Ashley, and even when Andrea called her, she wouldn't pick up. And after trying to reach her for hours, Andrea began to panic, but still she didn't stop calling. Finally, by afternoon, the call was answered. The only problem was, it wasn't Ashley's voice on the line, but that of another man. And when Andrea asked who it was, the man identified himself as the chief police inspector. He told her that her daughter's phone had been found with a suspect who'd confessed to a serious crime. And for some reasons unknown to the officer, Peter decided to come out clean about how he met a girl named Ashley and how the encounter turned violent. He told officers that he killed Ashley, suffocated her, and left her body in a secluded area. And you can see on the CCTV footage the exact moment police realized they were no longer dealing with a routine confession, but a far more serious crime.
Right, come Sunday, please.
Right, do you remember what you said to me in the cell?
I killed somebody last night. I need to tell somebody from CID where the body is.
Peter then took the police to the place he'd hidden the body, and Ashley's grandfather was then brought to the scene to identify her, and he confirmed that it was indeed Ashley. But even though Peter had come clean to the officers, the true extent of what happened to Ashley was only revealed after the post-mortem was concluded. It turns out Ashley had been taken advantage of and killed, and her body was then dumped near the fence, where it was later found. Peter's trial was scheduled to take place at Teesside Crown Court in March of 2010, but since he pleaded guilty, the court moved straight to sentencing instead. And so on March 8th, 2010, Peter was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years. But the story wasn't done here. This crime had caused such an outrage that Facebook and the police of the UK faced immense criticism for letting such a thing happen. Now, Ashley's death was tragic, but this next case is even more unsettling since the perpetrator wasn't a stranger.
The anonymous tip advised that he killed both of his parents last night at 5 p.m. He used the back of a hammer and that they can be found in bed at this location.
During the early 90s, Port St. Lucie in Florida turned into a utopia for middle-class residents who started moving into the county after real estate companies started building houses there. And among them was the Hadley family. Blake Hadley, the father who worked as an engineer at a nearby nuclear power plant, his wife, Mary Jo Hadley, an elementary school teacher who was loved by her students, and their two sons, Ryan and Tyler. Now, while Ryan's growth was quite normal, the same couldn't be said for Tyler, who suffered developmental problems that constantly left his parents worried. He wasn't the only one battling serious health issues though, as Mary also had a long history with chronic depression. However, she seemed to have learned to manage it pretty well. But over time, it became clear that Tyler might have inherited the mental health struggles from his mother. And on top of that, Tyler wasn't exactly normal at the time of his birth, as he had a head circumference that was smaller than kids of his age. And by the age of 6, Tyler showed obvious behavioral tendencies that prompted his parents to sign him up for counseling. And by age 10, his condition had only worsened, to the point that he had to be put on medications. Tyler also had a low thyroid hormone, which made him short, stocky, and a target for bullies at school. And so by the end of his high school, something clicked on him, and he changed drastically. He wasn't his cheerful self anymore. Instead, Tyler would start to seek attention by engaging in constant rowdy behavior. For example, as part of this new trend, Tyler, with a few of his friends, took an abandoned couch and lit it on fire near the school. But when the police found out, they didn't arrest him. Instead, they left the teenagers with a warning. And at the same time, Port St. Lucie was also changing. More and more residents began growing marijuana at home and selling it illegally. And this was so rampant that people started calling the place Port St. Lucie. And being surrounded by that kind of substance, Tyler slowly gravitated towards that and other drugs. Now in 2011 was the year that everything would fall apart. 17-year-old Tyler got into a violent fight with a friend, and the altercation was so intense that he would end up getting arrested and would go on to spend a week in jail. And after his release, Tyler was then placed under house arrest, and Mary, increasingly alarmed by his behavior, took away his phone. And this angered Tyler greatly and only worsened the already strained relationship between him and his parents. But before that, for months, Tyler had already casually joked to his friends about killing his parents. And as tensions at home escalated, the jokes began to sound less and less like satire and more like a plan. And on the night Mary actually confiscated his phone, Tyler texted his friend,
"Lol, yup, she's a..." for sure. I might kill her. Oh my god, no jail, or I mean prison, lol. Oh well.
And it was obvious that Tyler had made a decision at this point. And then came July 16th. At around 12:15 p.m. on that fateful day, Tyler posted a message on his Facebook wall, which read,
"Party at my crib tonight, maybe."
And then later that night, Tyler made another post to confirm that the party was indeed happening.
"Party at my house, hit me up."
And by 11:30, people began arriving. Tyler appeared normal, but his house did not. The furniture was scattered everywhere, and his parents were nowhere to be seen. And when asked about them, Tyler gave conflicting answers, telling some of them that they had gone to Orlando, and others that they were in Georgia. He also claimed that they no longer lived with him and that the house was his. Now most of his guests didn't question it, or at least didn't care. They were there to have fun, but still even they sensed that something was wrong, and a strong stench just hung in the air. And dark, red, grimy fluid stained parts of the floor and smeared across the family computer's keyboard. And Tyler's behavior only added to the unease. During a conversation with his friend Mark, Tyler quietly confessed that he'd killed someone and would be going to jail. But because of how insane Tyler's story sounded, Mark didn't believe it and would later simply leave the party. But everything started to unravel when Tyler sat down with his best friend, Michael Mandel, later that night. He told him that he'd killed his parents. But just like Mark, Michael also laughed it off at first and told him to stop joking about stuff like that. But Tyler insisted and pointed out that his parents' car was still parked in the driveway, even though he mentioned earlier that they weren't home. And Michael, now feeling very uneasy, followed him into the garage. And upon entering, Tyler pointed to the floor. And it was there that Michael saw a bloodied footprint surrounded by pooled blood. But before Michael could truly process what he was seeing, Tyler led him toward the master bedroom. And this bedroom was cluttered with random items from around the house. But that wasn't what Tyler wanted Michael to see. As Michael stepped closer, he froze as he saw a white human leg protruding from the pile. And the realization hit him all at once, and Tyler began explaining what he'd done. Tyler told him that he'd first hidden their phones and locked the family dog in a cupboard so it couldn't bark. Then he grabbed a hammer and walked up behind Mary as she worked on the computer, and when she turned, he struck her while she screamed. Blake then rushed out from the bedroom and froze. And despite his size, seeing his wife being attacked left him helpless. He only managed to ask,
"Why?"
Before then Tyler replied,
"Why the frick not?"
and continued hitting him until he stopped moving. Tyler then told Mike that he wrapped his parents in towels and moved their bodies into the master bedroom. Now after hearing all of these gory details, Michael ran out from the bedroom, but he would only leave the party 45 minutes later and even took a selfie with Tyler. But by around 10:30 a.m, the party slowly began to thin out, and guests started leaving the house. And it was around this time that a neighbor finally snapped and called the police, fed up with the unbearable noise coming from Tyler's house. But officers arrived, spoke briefly with Tyler, and then left. Now Ryan Stonesteffer was the last to leave at around 3 a.m, and he later recalled seeing Tyler casually making himself a sandwich. And hours later, at 4:40 a.m, Tyler posted again on Facebook, as if nothing had happened.
"Party at my house again, hit me up."
But there wasn't going to be any party, because Michael had called the police and told them everything he knew. And before long, the police were now in front of Tyler's store, with their guns raised, ordering Tyler to come out of the house. Now after his arrest, Tyler was put on trial as a juvenile, and as per law in Florida, he couldn't be given the electric chair. And as a result, he was instead sentenced to 2 consecutive life imprisonments without the possibility of parole in 2013.